For over 40 years, nearly 150,000 customers and over 30,000 channel partners spanning the globe have trusted Arcserve to strengthen their data resilience, recover lost assets, and ensure business continuity. With a unified approach to data protection and recovery, world-class technical support, and the lowest total cost of ownership, Arcserve helps businesses manage, defend, and most importantly, recover their data from any situation. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Massey, and I am the America's VP of Sales for Arcserve. Thank you so much for attending our latest edition of Beyond the Arc. This talk will not be any type of sales pitch, but rather a discussion on industry trends and the effect that it has on our partners and our customers. Today, I have as my guest Vitaly Andreykin. Vitaly leads the sales and marketing efforts globally for Arcserve. Hi, Vitaly. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me on.
Good. Well, I don't know, actually, I know you know about this, but in June is Backup Awareness Month. And that is really the topic that we have going today. And I'm just going to really make a bold prediction right here. My bold prediction is that data loss will happen and you'll need to recover. Regardless of the size or the scope of what you're doing in your network world, one thing I think is very consistent is that we will see data loss and we'll need to recover from that.
That's a very true statement, Sean. Very resonates with me. I speak to our customers, and some of the smaller ones occasionally tell me, Vitaly, we're ransomware, sure, we're kind of too small to get hit and to really get encrypted. And the reality, I tell them, is they're not too small to get hit. They're too small to make the news when they get hit and their data is encrypted and they're facing a choice to pay the ransomware, the ransom, or to lose their data. So you're right, you're spot on. Data loss is going to happen, and it's going to be an important and timely decision of how to recover from that.
And when we think about data loss, of course, there's the natural disasters, the fire, the flood, the tornado, hurricane, tsunami, earthquake, those type of things. But also, I mean, we're seeing other areas such as user error or hardware failure.
Yeah, you're right. So on the you mentioned Mother Nature and the external risks. Let's remember the internal hardware risks. Hardware is designed to certain specifications to last a certain period of time, and from that point on, statistically, hardware failure becomes increasingly likely. So hardware, hard disk drives, irrespective of technology, are subject to that. And then, of course, there's the human element, and there we can think of two parts there. There is the accidental user error, accidental loss of data from an error, but there's also intentional and malicious attacks from users.
Yeah, and when I think about that, I don't know if I told you that I used to manage a data center, and that data center burnt down one night way back in 2008. That was a bad night for me. It was even a very bad week. Actually, it was heading into Easter weekend, and when we think about that, when I think about that, I think about we had a disaster plan, but it was never tested, and there were some reasons why it hadn't been tested. Mostly, back, even you think 2008 is not that far away, but that's light years away as far as the way that technology has changed. And so, money and time and effort on that, but it was something, certainly, it was certainly an event that ignited my passion for disaster recovery and business continuity.
And I bet you still remember that when that happened, it's around the clock work to get it, to restore the data, to get back online, probably for several days. Sometimes it takes longer than that. We spoke about I just mentioned the user error. that even the most sophisticated companies are not immune from that. You probably have read about that story of a month ago, in the Australian financial institution worth over $100 billion lost the entirety of the data due to a user error on the side of their none other than their cloud service provider, Google Cloud. And it took them, again, a couple of weeks of round-the-clock work, and at the same time, not just recovering their data, but at the same time managing the communication to their employees and to their customers who are trying to access their pensions to recover from that incident.
Yeah, it certainly it can happen, and it can happen at any time. And when I think I've seen the statistics that our analysts have, that really user error ends up being the most common reason for data loss, right? As we look at that, it's the ransomware actors, the bad actors are getting all the press, but user error often is where that comes. Go ahead.
To your point where you were going, I think is irrespective of these causes, nature, hardware failure, intentional malicious attack, whether externally or internally, by the way, that happens too, or just accidents and user error, fat fingers, I think the financial sector terminology is, irrespective of the causes, what's really key to defend against that is to have a data resilience plan that is tested regularly.
Absolutely. And when we think about data resilience, certainly data protection is part of that. And for a long time, there's been the tried and true efforts of the 3-2-1 method. And the 3-2-1 method was a way of, and really when this was designed, ransomware was not even anywhere on the page. So it was an idea to say, how do we protect ourselves from a local disaster, the oops type of fat finger, I accidentally just brought everything down. How do we protect ourselves from a catastrophic event where we've lost everything in our data? Well, what has been done, what was constructed was this, hey, you should have 3 copies of your data, right? It should contain 2 mediums, right? Meaning you shouldn't be having your production data for your servers, like your VMs, on the same piece of equipment and disk that your backups are going to, right? We want to make sure that we segment the mediums on that. So you have at least 2 mediums, and then you have that offsite method to be able to do that. And for years, this was absolutely sufficient. Can you guess what changed that caused us to add another one?
Let me guess, ransomware, right?
Absolutely. And so with ransomware, what can happen is the bad actors can infiltrate the network and start the encryption of the data, but so often that takes hours before it even gets detected. And then that gets captured by the backups, and then that gets replicated off to the offsite. And if they had a whole weekend to be able to do that methodology, then you come in on Monday or Tuesday if it's a long weekend, and everything is encrypted. So that's where our analysts really are recommending folks to have a 3-2-1-1 method, and that one is immutability.
That's right. And by the way, I think it's important to quickly note at the start, the 3 there stands for the production copy, the backup, and then 1 additional copy, right? So you do count the live environment, the production copy in that 3. But then the one that gets added at the end of this framework, that's the green arrow at the bottom of your slide, an immutable copy of the backup set, WARM. And WARM here it's an acronym, it stands for write once, read many. So what this refers to is that even if the main environment, the ransomware attack gets through and the main environment gets encrypted, and as the example that you gave, over maybe a period of a long holiday weekend, that gets sufficient time to then encrypt the backup, and even encrypt the backup in the cloud or in an offsite location, that immutable copy cannot be modified. It cannot be changed. It cannot be encrypted. It cannot be written over. It is immune and immutable to that ransomware attack, and allows you, that's the last stopgap, allows you to be recovered from.
I mean, absolutely. And, when you think about, for those that have been in IT for a long time, Worm was those tape, back in the, where all we had was tape backups, where you could not overwrite anything on the tape. Now that actually concept has been applied to immutable storage, where you're able to make sure that the actual data is just not reachable by the bad actors, so that the data is still there to be able to recover from. Vitaly, what about SaaS? What about SaaS applications?
Yes, that's another, of course, growing in importance business motion, but also speaking with our customers, some of them still are surprised when they learn about the shared responsibility model. And the shared responsibility model, in a nutshell, is the idea that your SaaS provider, your cloud software provider, be that Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, Zendesk, or many others, adopt this policy, which says that they are responsible for their infrastructure and for delivering the software to you. But you, the end customer, remain responsible for your data. And what this means in practical terms is that if a malicious actor infiltrates your company's Gmail environment, Google environment, and selects all the emails and deletes them and goes to the trash bin and empties the trash, Google will not have a backup of the data. And the same idea by analogy can be applied to Microsoft, to Salesforce, and others. And that's where SaaS backup is absolutely critical to protect against those types of data loss.
I mean, absolutely. And boy, I mean, that would be a nightmare if a bad actor had gone in and just deleting the data. But all of a sudden, as you were talking, my mind went to, like, what if a bad actor compromised a Microsoft 365 tenant and deleted objects out of Entra ID, which was, the Azure AD type of thing. That's like the brains of that. Would be absolutely devastating and catastrophic.
Yeah, big immediate business disruption, really. So that's why that environment is critical to protect as well.
Well, all of this really makes me think it's very important for folks to have a high level of importance on their business continuity and disaster recovery planning. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's important to have a plan, right? It's important to have a disaster recovery business continuity plan. It's equally important to not just have it somewhere in the folder and put it away, but actually regularly revisiting it and testing it and validating that it still meets the requirements of an evolving environment.
I mean, absolutely. And testing. People ask me all the time, how often should I test? And now I always couch it and I say, well, you're talking to somebody who endured a whole catastrophic event. I would say test as much as you can, right? To have that comfortability of restoration.
I think each business needs to find its own answer to that question, but it behooves IT security leaders to take into account the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective to devise their data resilience strategy and take into account the realities of their business to define the testing period that they need to follow.
Yeah, with all of the news of certainly of ransomware, bad actors, and the cyber attacks and everything, obviously there's been a large amount of development and innovation in the security world in order to help protect it. Do you were telling me about some type of study, the Beltzman effect?
Oh, the Peltzman effect, yeah. And you may want to take off this slide. That's not really relevant to this story, but yeah, that's a story that I find pretty fascinating. It speaks to the importance of training the users, the end users in your company, as the front line of defense and the entry point for phishing attacks, for example. Training them on the importance of data, of best practices in cybersecurity. So the Peltzman effect is something that dates back to 1975, and the study of that came about in the context of studying auto safety features. The researchers realized that when people learn about the existence of a safety net, their perception of the risk is modified, and sometimes people tend to adopt riskier behaviors because they are aware that that safety net exists. Again, this theory, and validated many times by many studies. This theory was developed in the context of auto safety features. What this means for us is, in our world, is how important it is to train the end users and raise that awareness about the best practices in the field of cybersecurity, but not necessarily spend our time educating them on all the data resilience strategy that exists and that must be put in place, as we said, and that must be regularly tested in the back end. That way, they will not excessively rely on the existence of backup, but will maintain awareness and hopefully follow the best practices in terms of cybersecurity.
Well, that's an excellent point. And with that point, actually, we're really up with our time today. Thank you, Vitaly, very much for joining me on this LinkedIn Live today, and really appreciate your insights and the conversation as always, to be able to do that. And we'll be having another LinkedIn Live again in the next couple of weeks, and so keep an eye out. We'll be sending out our invites to that. Protect what's priceless, and remember, data resilience doesn't just happen.
Thank you, Sean.